Hello, I'm Jim Greene. I'm the co-director of the U.S.-Ukraine Foundation's Ukraine 2020 Policy Dialogue Project. We're delighted to have with us today and this week two prominent experts in the area of security and defense who are acting as co-chairs for a task force under the Policy Dialogue Project. They are Mr. Leonid Polyakov from Kiev and Mr. Nurick from Washington. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
You've had a number of meetings this week. You've kicked off the work of the task force. Can you give us some impressions?
Well, the meetings this week have taken advantage of Leonid's visit here to do two things. One is to introduce Leonid to the members, the American members of the task force. There will eventually be 5 of us, along with 5 Ukrainians, and to start to have a serious discussion about what this group can usefully do. So we've met among ourselves. We've met with people in the interested expert community. We've met with people in the government, at the NSC, at state, and the Defense Department to start thinking about a serious, implementable, concrete agenda for this group that will have the results the impact that we want, and that essentially means to continue and deepen ties between the expert communities of our two countries, but also to have, as I say, to identify issues that will be useful for Ukraine, and which will have in the longer run the additional impact of furthering Ukraine's integration with engagement with Western institutions.
Thank you. Leonid, first impressions from the work of the task force from your visit to Washington?
Well, before going to impressions, I think it is important for our viewers to have some knowledge about the background of this project. I think it is a very good idea behind this Ukraine 2020 project, and I appreciate efforts of you personally and U.S.-Ukraine Foundation to promote the dialogue, the policy dialogue between think tank, mostly experts, on two sides. The first important thing I want to mention is that after 20 years of independent development, Ukrainian civil society developed quite sizable and vibrant pool of security and defense experts. And why not to capitalize on this instrument and to make additional parallel opportunity to support governmental policies of our countries in a more, I would say, independent and probably stable way. Bureaucrats come and go, governments come and go, policies have their ups and downs, but experienced experts like Bob, for instance, or me, if you will, in this security sector area, I think can provide necessary continuity to have or to support our common interests in a more stable way. As you know, for 20 years already, starting maybe from the famous speech by the President Bush Sr. in the Ukrainian Parliament, more than 20 years ago, our relationship had already accumulated substantial experience, both positive, which is a good one, but still this experience shows that we need more kind of, I'll use this word again, more stable relationship, less dependent on the political winds. And the idea, as I understand it, is to capitalize on the expertise of those who already, for many years, either had a career in the government and then back to the think tank or as independent expert, or in research institutions, like Bob, for instance, has a prominent career in many, in the Rand Corporation and other Carnegie and so on. So we will bring together Ukrainian part of the task force and American part of the task force in an effort to develop new ideas, or at least to try to see deeper into certain projects and certain policies, which is fundamentally helpful in terms of supporting our national security and defense interests. This is how I see the beginning of this project. But going back to what Bob said about the meetings here, I feel positive. We, on the Ukraine side at least, now we have counterparts on different segments, not just defense, but also defense industry, new security threats, arms control, arms export control, border control. These areas are the areas where challenges to both countries, to security of both countries, are evident, and I'm sure we will have on our plate a lot of issues to discuss. Just this is the beginning, and let's wait and see how will it develop.
So, thank you. Ukraine has been in the news a lot recently, and we know that there are challenges in the relationship with the European Union, with the United States. Security and defense issues have long been advertised and shown as one of the real, say, flagship projects of cooperation. Can we expect that to continue in the current situation? Is that still true? Do the two countries still share strategic interests?
Well, I think stepping back, there are shared strategic interests, but I think the question about the nature, whether or not cooperation in this particular area, the area of security and defense, can be insulated from the underlying political problems in the relationship, is a very good question. This has been a successful area in general. It's also been a difficult one. I mean, even before. So that's not new. And we understand perfectly well that while we think it's important to sustain these relationships, the underlying the political environment around them does matter. There are certainly questions here in Washington, for example, about not whether there's a U.S. interest in cooperation. I think everyone understands there is, but whether the current government in Kiev is really interested. And one of the things that we want to do, I think, in this effort, is to identify those areas where cooperation can be done for mutual benefit, understanding perfectly well that the politics does matter. But we're going to be looking for areas where we think these things can be sustained. In that sense, we're taking what we hope will be a slightly more strategic view. It's not that we're indifferent to or going to ignore what's going on around us. That's impossible. But we also know that things change over time, and we want to keep a foundation in place that will allow for this cooperation to continue and to be enhanced if politics change.
A long-term view,
Yeah.
but with understanding of the short-term realities. It is a strong position to take. Leonid, what, from your discussions this week and your meetings with your American counterparts and with the U.S. government officials, do you see that there is an interest from the government in the work of the experts? And you have not yet had a meeting in Kiev, with American counterparts, but do you foresee that there will also be interests from Ukrainian authorities in the work of the group?
Well, the simple answer is yes, of course. However, it is just the beginning, and as naturally at the beginning, people talk about the fundamental interests on both sides. They do exist, as I understand. It was stated quite clearly that it is in the interest of the United States to have Ukraine independent, sovereign, democratic state, capable to contribute to international and regional security, in cooperation with not just the United States, but with other democratic countries. First of all, Europe, having in mind that Ukraine wants to integrate to the European Union, which means integration to the common security and defense policy of the European Union, and which means also that Ukraine wants to share the obligation for the regional security. And consequently, if we talk about the European security, we cannot avoid the issue of cooperation with NATO, as it is called or termed right now in Ukraine, constructive partnership with NATO. Within this constructive partnership, we have several visible cooperative projects where the United States plays a leading role. The first quite prominent case probably will be the trust fund on disposal of obsolete ammunition and small and light weapons, which is already 10 years old, and the second phase started. Recently, implementation agreement was ratified by Verkhovna Rada. About 25, if I remember correctly, $million will be contributed to disposal of the dangerous stuff, which is a challenge to Ukrainian security in this case, but this is an example how Ukrainian partners under the leadership of the United States within this project contribute to Ukrainian and regional security. And vice versa, Ukraine has sizable potential and experience in peacekeeping. And right now, 30 Ukrainian officers contribute to peace and stability in Afghanistan operation under the leadership of the United States in different capacities. We can also mention other projects where common interests are supported from both sides. This is the experience we already have, and on which we can capitalize and move ahead. However, there are areas where the window of opportunity exists, but it is not materialized yet. First of all, this is the areas of defense industry cooperation, research and development, border control, new security threats, famous new issue of fighting piracy, to which Ukraine wants to contribute. There are some other issues we can go on these things, and I'm just telling about the issues we were talking with U.S. officials, U.S. experts. We found general support. At this moment, it is quite enough to have. Just we are satisfied that we found this support, and it's up to us now with Bob and with our experts to implement this general support into practical projects, results, ideas, whatever.
In practical terms, Bob, what will we see out of the task force in a couple of months?
Well, the basic schedule is to have a lot of virtual meetings. That is, we'll be interacting with our Belarusian colleagues by email and telephone to produce, first of all, a draft, basically an issue paper, 4, 5, 6 pages, short and sweet, we hope, which will identify some particular areas where we think useful things can be done. The plan is to have a set of meetings probably in late May or early June to discuss these, revise as necessary, and then they'll be released later in June. That's the basic schedule for at least this first phase. So much of this, again, is to set an agenda, identify the right issues, try to frame them in terms of the broader objectives that we seek, discuss them among ourselves, and then have a wider discussion in Ukraine when we're ready.
Excellent. Thank you very much, and very much looking forward to seeing the results of the task force's work.
So are we.
Thank you.